All right. Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, April 4th, 2024 regular meeting of the school committee. I would invite those who are here live in the studio to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So first item on our agenda tonight is the public comment. For people who would like to make a public comment, we ask that you come up, state your name, your affiliation or address, and then make your comment. We do limit to 3 minutes per person for a total of a 15-minute public comment period. So are there people who are here who would like to make a public comment?
I don't know if other people are. I know there's a hot topic issue coming. I'm not speaking on that, so I didn't know if somebody else wants to go first. I have a different issue.
Nobody else raised their hand that I could see, so
Okay.
you come on up.
All right, cool.
Did you say that we were recorded?
Oh, yes, and the meeting, just for those who are here, should know that the meeting is being recorded by HCAM and will be available for replay later on.
And I'm keeping time.
All right, welcome.
Welcome, thank you. Let me just, 1 second. So I'm not a stranger to any of you guys, and I know the rules about the 3 minutes. I have about a 5-minute presentation. I know that this isn't a presentation, that wasn't the right word, but I'm really hoping that I can have the 5 minutes to share. I've really worked hard on preparing this, and it's something that I thought that I should bring to the board. I know that you guys allot 15 minutes, and if there's not any more comments, if I could have the 5 minutes, I'd really appreciate it.
So that is not something that actually we've done before. I would ask, are there other people who would like to make public comments tonight? Would be the first thing, just to kind of get a gauge. If there are any others, I mean, certainly people could come in before we're done. And then I would defer to my colleagues here on thoughts on making an adjustment to our public policy. Is there a possibility that you could keep it to 3?
Not really. I timed myself 3 times this afternoon, and I did pare it down, but I just think I need to have that time to say it. And I have it all written out. I'm ready to present and then be done.
I think it's fine without there being other people that would be waiting, and we weren't taking time away from anyone else. Ashley, I would just say you should introduce yourself and put your
Oh, yeah,
voice out there
absolutely.
just for the.
Absolutely. Ashley Fogg, 5 Cross Street. So is it okay if I get started?
Go ahead.
All right, awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you for the consideration. So, good evening. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. I want to extend my sincere thanks for the chance to share my concerns with the committee and Dr. Kavanaugh. Your willingness to listen and consider community input is truly appreciated. Hopkinton takes great pride in delivering an excellent education while prioritizing the safety and well-being of its students. Considering the emphasis Hopkinton places on providing a top-tier education and ensuring the safety of our children, I am here tonight to respectfully request that the school committee thoroughly examine and potentially update the attendance policy at Hopkinton Public Schools regarding unexcused absences. The current attendance policy states that absences will only be excused for the following reasons: bereavement, inclement weather, observance of religious holidays, exceptional reasons that would need approval from the school's principal, and finally, chronic or long-term illness or quarantine. While I appreciate the understanding extended to students facing chronic or long-term illnesses, I strongly express concern regarding the lack of accommodation for other illnesses despite parents providing documentation from their child's pediatrician justifying their absence. The emphasis on non-excused absence for illness is so significant that it's boldly stated in the elementary school handbook. It states, presenting a doctor's note will only excuse absences for ongoing chronic or long-term illnesses. This emphasis ensures parents are aware of the strict policy in place, and even if they get a note, their child's absence will not be excused. It's imperative that we review this policy, particularly in light of the lessons learned during the pandemic. As we strive to implement best practices for illness-related policies, a thorough review of our attendance policy is warranted. It's evident there's a disconnect between the current attendance policy and the guidelines set forth by the Health Service Department of Hopkinton Public Schools. These policies should be aligned to ensure consistency and prioritize health and safety. The current guidelines for return to school are the following. Students should remain home until fever-free for 24 hours without the use of medication. Students should remain home for 24 hours after vomiting or diarrhea. Students may return to school after 24 hours of antibiotics having been administered after strep throat. And head lice, they should return to school after treatment, but they have to check in with the nurse for clearance. I understand that these guidelines aim to minimize the spread of contagious illness among students, which is crucial. However, as parents, we find ourselves in a challenging position due to these measures. As parents, we strive to adhere to these guidelines, but we're often forced to choose between, I'm trying to go fast, sending our sick child to school or accumulating numerous unexcused absences. Maintaining the health of my 3 elementary-age children have been particularly challenging this winter. Despite diligent efforts to practice good hygiene, various illnesses, including the flu, have affected our household. These illnesses are often accompanied by symptoms like fever or vomiting and have resulted in multiple days of missed school. As many of us know, a bout of flu can keep a child home for a week or longer, and if followed by another illness such as strep throat within the same month, unexcused absences can quickly accumulate. This pattern is just one illustration of the recurrent cycle of illnesses that many parents, especially those with young children, experience during the winter season. As a parent, I consistently prioritize my children's health, seeking medical attention for each illness, and obtaining notes from their pediatrician to justify their absences, including a clear diagnosis. However, I've received notification from the assistant principals at their school informing myself and my husband that 2 of my 3 children have exceeded the permissible limit for unexcused absences. While I acknowledge that the assistant principals are mandated by law to send those letters, if a child surpasses 7 absences with a 6-month period, I urge the school committee to reevaluate the policy regarding unexcused absences. Additionally, I'd like to highlight that the letters from the assistant principals specify that absences will be excused for COVID-19. While I understand the significance of prioritizing safety amid the pandemic, I find it perplexing that only COVID-19 absences are excused while other documented communicable illnesses such as flu or stomach virus are not given the same consideration. As a parent, my concern for my child's health extends beyond COVID-19, and I believe all contagious illnesses should be treated equally in terms of excused absences. In conclusion, I'd like to draw attention to the concerning increase in illnesses with our elementary schools this year, particularly of late, the notable uptake in cases of strep throat at Elmwood. I respectfully urge this committee and Dr. Kavanaugh to address why the sanitation protocols, including the nightly use of sanitizing sprayers in classrooms implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic, appear to have been discontinued. Given their effectiveness in reducing the spread of germs, especially in the light of current health concerns, I believe it is imperative to reconsider and potentially reinstate these practices to ensure the health and safety of our school community. Thank you again for the opportunity to be heard. I do believe that reviewing and potentially revising these policies reflects a commitment to promoting a health and supportive learning environment for all students.
Thank you, Ashley.
I appreciate the time.
Just, I know you probably know this, but just for folks who are watching at home and here in the studio, just because it's not on the agenda, we don't respond in person,
did.
but it is something that
Nope.
we will keep.
Thank you.
For
I
future.
appreciate you listening, all of you. Thank you so much.
All right. So unless there are any others that have decided they want to make a public comment in the meantime, we will move into recognitions. Are there any recognitions that people would like to make here at the table? Okay. Then that moves us into reports.
Hello everyone. At the high school, April break is just around the corner. The break is full of important dates to the senior class. The Friday before break will be the end of any non-AP classes if students are doing a senior capstone project. While once the break is over, the official timing of senior projects will start. This involves submitting weekly reviews and material usages to mentors. All senior projects have now been approved to begin working. Before we go to break, however, the Student Council is running a Spirit Week. On Monday, students will wear pajamas. On Tuesday, the theme will be jerseys. On Thursday, will be a fan favorite of USA Day. And finally, Friday will be a Hiller theme. This week is also the last day to buy tickets for senior events such as the Red Sox game and the senior boat cruise.
Does the pajama day look different than the regular day?
For like half of the class, mostly, yeah.
Just speaking from someone.
You might get to
in
wear
high school
slippers as
student.
well, yeah. For juniors, tickets to this year's post-prom party are on sale through April 13th. Post-prom will be held at Pins directly after prom on May 10th from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. On top of this, Unite applications are also now live. The Unite program is looking for enthusiastic, creative, and passionate upperclassmen to take the lead in shaping the new Unite program for the class of 2028. A quick congratulations to those who participated in the All-State Music Festival. Congratulations to Aman, Aritro, and Adi for performing this past weekend at Symphony Hall. Lastly, spring sports have begun their regular seasons. The boys and girls tennis teams both started off their seasons with 5-0 sweeps over Norwood. The softball team also started with a win over Norwood, 8-3. However, the baseball team lost their home opener 2-0 to start the season. The first track meet will take place on Friday, tomorrow, in Medfield. And lastly, but not least, the girls' golf team is off to a great 2-0 start this season. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
No problem.
Any questions for Jack? Okay. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing stories about Spirit Week and seeing photos of that.
I'll have everything.
Next superintendent's report. All right, so we're going to take a break from reports and move into the Hopkins project update. Nice to see you again.
Thanks.
Good night. Thank you.
Well,
Nice to see you again.
Thank you for having me. Jeff D'Amico from the Vertex Companies, your owner's project manager on the Hopkins Lower Middle School project. So tonight I'm here to talk about a few things. We met in front of you a few weeks ago. Since then, the project team has been working very diligently on several aspects of the project, including finishing design, starting the permitting process, budget management, as well as outreach to the community. And so I'm here to talk about a few of those aspects. The agenda I'd like to cover tonight is just a quick update on the community forum, which occurred last night, an update on value engineering to get the price back in line, and then a proposal in front of you to have mechanical, electrical, and plumbing commissioning services. And then we'll talk about next steps. So as far as the community forum, last night we held a community forum at this location at HCAM. They were nice enough to host us here. That is available for view on the YouTube channel of HCAM. I know we ran into some technical difficulties with the QR code in terms of the ones that was posted on the website required a passcode, and so not everybody was able to get into the initial Zoom meeting. But the good news is it was recorded on HCAM and is available on YouTube channels, and we did see some hits today of people watching that already, and so it's out there for the public to view. For those at home that are viewing tonight, last night's presentation included a presentation of the phasing plans, the logistics plans for the project, updates on cost information, as well as design elevations and renderings, all of which were presented to this committee only a few weeks ago with some subsequent updates that occurred since that time. Any questions on that piece? Okay. So value engineering. So when I last was in front of you, we talked about the initial price of the design development estimate, which is the mid milestone of the design phase of the project, had increased since the schematic design, which was last priced in November of last year. At that time, we targeted items and talked to the committee about where we wanted to tighten up the overall budget. This is a list of the items that we started to discuss at last week's meeting, or 2 weeks ago. And this is the update that we have since now. So we looked at a targeted reduction in the geothermal wells. We were able to do a test well over the February break, and the results came back positive. We were able to reduce the overall number of wells. We're scheduled for this April break to do some ledge tests to verify where the ledge is. There is ledge on the existing site. We did find that in the original test pits that we did over the summer. And so what we're really trying to do now is narrow in on it so we can know exactly how much rock is out there and what's the appropriate allowances to carry to deal with those rock elements. Notably, it's in the area where the fire lane is today and the start of the basketball zone there, where it exists today on the campus. The items in yellow are in progress, so we're doing a deeper dive with phasing and logistics with the CM to try and tighten that up. We were able to make reductions to the outdoor classroom space and the shade structure that were on the site plan. overall reduction in site plan improvements, which I'll talk about in the following slide. We're in process with Eversource. We've reached out to them and talking about a reduction of the additional transformer that they suggested was needed. We may be able to do that with the existing building service itself. We talked a lot about that at your last meeting. We've engaged Eversource, and that is in process at the moment. And lastly, we were able to go back to the fire protection engineers and verify that we were able to reuse more of the existing system. Initially, they thought that they had to replace all the sprinkler heads in some of the rooms because we were adjusting a few of the ceiling grids, but that's not the case. We're able to maintain the existing ceiling grids, and so therefore we don't need to remove and replace the piping in those rooms. It's only the mains that lead from the existing building over to the new addition. On the soft cost side of things, we've engaged with the builder's risk. We've sent them everything they need as of the end of last week, and we're waiting on their quotes to come back, so that's the item in blue there. Again, noting the engagement with Eversource in yellow, and then commissioning, we are here to report back tonight that we were able to selectively solicit 3 proposals that came in under the budget, and so the savings with that as well. So all in, it's about $1,081,000 in value engineering, which I'll talk about on the next slide, that we were able to wring out of the project between last meeting and today. Kind of snapshot of what that $1.1 million represents. So we removed an underground system under the athletic field, removed the shade structure that was an outdoor classroom function around the building. One of the larger elements was the gym. The athletic department had requested a hard partition between the gyms so that you could separate it into 3 teaching spaces. We had 1 hard wall between the multipurpose room, and there was a second movable partition. Well, in order to do that, it has to be automated because of just the pure size of that wall that needs to slide from one side of the gym to the other. And so that ended up being a significant cost to the project and one of the drivers there. So we've went back to the traditional lowering of a net. And so it's like all the other schools in district, with the exception of the middle school, which did have a hard partition. This is in line with the other schools within the district, which is a rollable partition that comes down from the ceiling, which is just essentially a net and a tarp. So that was the most significant of the savings at $330,000. Also looking at reductions of site furnishings, so this includes some benches and picnic tables and trash cans that were around the site. Landscape architects always early on try to put everything on the table, and that is an area we always trim back regardless of where we are in the project. We took a hard look at that now and were able to reduce that by about half. The outdoor basketball court, and so what this is that on a basketball court you can either paint the lines or resurface the whole thing. Think of a colored court, where you have Hopkins colors, as well as a playable surface, has a kind of that thicker coating like you'd see on a thermoplasting on a traffic. As you're driving down the highway, you'll see a thicker paint that you do on regular roadways. So we're able to pull that back out and just go with traditional paint around the keys of the basketball court. It's about $50,000 in savings. The geothermal, doing those test wells paid dividends. We were able to pull $156,000 out of the overall project, as well as the glycol system, which we don't need, which was for the freeze thaw of the geothermal system. The engineers are comfortable that we do not need that as well. So that was another $19,000 that we were able to pull out of it. And lastly, working with the facilities department, we were able to transition some of the sidewalks to, instead of concrete, to back to asphalt. Asphalt is easier to lay down and actually works better with some of the salt products that they use around the town. And so that worked on multiple fronts. So all in all, the VE savings that you see listed on the screen total $1,081,000 that the project team is recommending that we accept and move forward with as we go into the next phase of the project.
Can I ask a question about this? Is this the bad time to do it, Nancy, or was it fine?
No, this is the time.
So, I mean, some of these things are, like, for me, like the under drain system at the field, like, what impact will that have not having that? And if we are at a later point in the project, assuming that the town moves forward with the project and we find that we're coming in under budget, is there room for any of these to be brought back in, or do they have to be part of it now? I guess that's where my question, it's a convoluted
It's a great question. And it actually is the impetus of where we started with a lot of this value engineering, things that could be put on the shelf, if you will, for later. And that under drain and the site furnishings are 2 perfect examples of that. Even the basketball court surfacing, those are things that if we get favorable bid results, those 3 items could come back into the overall project, but not burdening the taxpayers by asking for that money up front. We're able to reduce the overall initial number, But should we have bid savings and should we tighten up the numbers and have contingencies at the end of the projects, the committee could look to put those elements back in the overall job. Keep in mind that this project is a construction manager, so there will be contingencies built into their overall contract. And as we go through the course of the project, the risk starts to fall away, and so that contingency becomes available to spend on those elements. And these site elements specifically are things you would handle at the very end of the project. And so it's a great point, Laurie, that you're able to make another decision at a later date to bring that back in, should money allow within the budget.
The only one that I see here that would likely not be able to do is the partition. And I guess my question with that is, what impact on the education plan will that not having a more permanent wall have? Because was there a plan for those rooms that it would be, like, the noise would impact?
Right, so now in the Hopkins gym, they don't have the permanent wall in between those two sides, and we do run 2 PE courses concurrently. I don't think that it's a problem there now. However, we do have the multipurpose room that's going to be attached to that, and so if there was something that we thought needed some more quiet, or if you had kids who had multisensory kinds of issues and didn't do well in places where there was, you know, a lot of noise, that's really a place in the multipurpose room where we can make sure that that happens.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
On the gym divider, can we down the line, if for some reason it's not working out, would we have missed the opportunity to put the tracks or whatever would be necessary to have that permanent divider?
Yeah, the gym divider is one that you'd need to make a decision on now, because we would build the overall steel to handle that.
Yeah.
I will say excellent questions by Laurie and the group, because of the design of the Hopkins, you have the ability to do both, where you have that multi-purpose room to have that quiet sensory space, and you still have the regular normal-sized gymnasium that has that curtain divider.
Yeah.
The curtain divider is the more typical that we see all around the state, and, is certainly acceptable to many districts and towns, and acoustics will be part of that side of the gym regardless, and so there will be acoustical treatment. Gyms are loud by nature, so there's no guarantees, but the reality of those significant partitions that are a story and a half, keep in mind the gym is, a double height space, and so those are large walls that rarely do get used in other districts if they are installed.
And just to pick up on, I was curious about the under drain system. What functionality does it serve? And do most of our fields have an under drain system? Would this be unusual not to put this in?
So it's the under drain system would dry the field out sooner. So on days like today where you have a lot of rain and you want it to wick away faster, it allows it to kind of ferry away. The one thing we did keep in the overall budget is a level of gravel, so crushed stone, to allows that to permeate. So the under drain design had that crushed stone layer and a pipe. What this represents is removing the piping that goes around the field to pull that water out faster. It does still have that crushed gravel layer that does allow the free draining of the water. It varies town to town, it varies site to site. Certainly, sites that are wetter can benefit more from this. Sites that are drier certainly don't need it, and so it does vary overall. This is an element that you could choose to put back at a later date, because it is one of the last things we do on our way out the door as we wrap up the overall project. It is a nice to have. I'll definitely say that, if money can afford it, it's nice to have.
Yeah.
But it should still function. But, myself driving around my own town today, I saw the fields closed signs, right? So you're starting to see that, even the golf courses today, right? Because they don't want to tear up their fields. When you get into this section of the season, you have a lot of water and it's not draining fast, you have longer periods of shut down fields.
Yeah. Just one last question on the basketball court. Would the maintenance of regular paint be more frequent? Would the cost of ownership be more by going this route versus the original route that you said?
It would be, yep. There would be more, paint does not last as long as the kind of thicker surfacing.
Yeah.
But you're also covering a lot less area where you're just painting the keys versus the entirety of the field, entirety of the court. So it's a different area in terms of square footage of what you're reapplying.
Okay.
The other comment that Matt Cotter had for this, because he does value getting his kids out all the time, so he would be asking for this to be plowed so that the kids get out there. So that also has an impact on that full painted surface as opposed to the lines, it would get dug up sooner.
So this is better.
You're gonna dig it up both. If you're plowing the surface, you're essentially, scraping it up, right? And so over time, both of them will wear away, but the reapplication is less expensive for just the painted key
Yeah.
than the full coating of the court.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I appreciate the going in with kind of really sharpening the pencils and having our taxpayers in mind, and even though there are lots of nice to have things, evaluating where we could appreciate some savings.
No problem. So, and it's part of the process, right? We would do that anyway, but it's more important, right? Whenever the number ticks up, we gotta make sure we get it back down. And so the next steps of where we are is, if everything looks good here, we'll accept these items, we'll move forward. The drawings, the next iteration just came out yesterday, and so we're now gonna enter another estimating cycle. And if you recall from your last meeting, we're gonna come back to you at the end of the month with an updated number. And so we're not resting, we're continuing to look at it. The design team is continuing to look at opportunities for cost savings. These are the ones that were obvious and able to, easily carve out. But we're gonna look at ways to tighten up the number over the next 3 weeks as we come back in front of you for a final number that will ultimately go to town meeting.
And if I recall correctly, last night you had said that that number would be available ahead of the forum.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So our estimates are due to us on the 23rd of April. We're going to sit, we have 2 independent estimators. We'll sit on the 23rd and reconcile those. We'll come back in front of this committee on the 25th to present those numbers. And then we've scheduled the community forum for the following week, I think the 30th, to present that to the public before we get to the Maytown meeting on the 6th. And then all that will be available on the website too. Certainly once you guys finalize the number, we'll have that available so people can get to it at the touch of their phones.
Do you need a vote?
We do need a vote to approve the recommended cost reduction proposals as presented. Unless there's anybody who wanted to make a different motion.
And that's separate from the commissioner, right? That's next.
Correct, it's 2 separate.
I move to approve the recommended class recommendation proposals as presented.
Okay, thank you. Motion by Susan, is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Lori, all those in favor?
Aye.
And it is unanimous, thank you
Great,
for that.
thank you.
And then,
So this is the
That's
slide that was
here.
presented to the public yesterday at the community forum. So just to quickly recap where we're at the moment in terms of cost. There was the original $3 million appropriation. The last estimate was 42.5 million, and about $8 million in soft costs. That was tracking at $53,480,000. We just accepted that $1,080,000 in value engineering. And so at the bottom, that brings us to a current potential ask at town meeting, currently at $48,550,000 at the moment. And like I said, we're entering that estimating cycle, and we'll come back to you with updated numbers at that point.
thank you.
So the other item that I wanted to talk to you this evening about is the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing commissioning consultant. And so the design team has their team. They'll do the full design of the overall project, but it's always good to have an independent set of eyes that help with the verification stage and look out for the facilities department to be a peer review of the overall process. And so we're recommending for this project to carry a mechanical, electrical, and plumbing commissioning consultant. And so their job there is listed here in terms of the major scope part. Because it's an existing system, we're looking to do a light level of retro commissioning. And what that means is really just going in and looking at the existing conditions to get the baseline. Because if you don't do that, once you replace all the systems, if it doesn't work, you're going to be looking at the contractor to why it doesn't work. But we want to make sure that it was working appropriately before we replaced the systems that are at the end of their useful life. And so that retro commissioning allows us to have another data point to know with a higher level of certainty what was functioning appropriately before we disconnected everything. Because otherwise it becomes a finger pointing contest at the end of the overall project. And so that is about $4,500 of the overall number that we would recommend moving forward with. Other than that, it's to provide support for the facilities department, to provide that third-party independent eyes, both in the verification and the construction stage, but more importantly, the post-occupancy. And that's really where commissioning does most of their work. They do that testing, they would do support and help with the training and turnover, and then that post-occupancy evaluation. So we solicited 3 proposals on behalf of the committee from 3 firms we've worked successfully with on many projects, both through our office and through the MSBA. They're Rist, Frost, and Shumway, so RFS, NV5, and WSP. And so all 3 of them are firms we've worked with several times each. They're all pre-qualified with the MSBA process, independent of this, and do a lot of work with the MSBA pipeline. They've all very skilled at what they do. We went and got 3 competitive price proposals. We broke it down in terms of design phase services. Because we're at the end of design, that was really light lift. So most of this, this $65,000 is related to the construction phase and post-occupancy. But it was broken down in terms of number of site visits in construction, the number of site visits for post-occupancy comparison, and then a 10-month commissioning. So coming back at the end, after everything's done, after the school has had possession of the building, to really sit with the facilities department and make sure they understand what's working and what's not while you're still in the warranty phase, so that you can then go back and talk to the contractors and make sure you get those missing elements addressed. So of the 3 services, there were 3 varying proposals. WSP was the low proposal by far, and we're comfortable with them. We equalized out the 3 proposals in terms of adding in a couple of extra site visits to WSP to be aligned with the other 2 proposals. And so we're recommending an overall construction commissioning MEP consultant contract of $65,653.50. But we don't need to award all of that today. What we really need to award is the design phase element, which would be done between now and the next couple of months. And so that's the number at the bottom of the screen here, which is that retro commissioning, which is about $4,500, and then the balance, $5,000 or so, is for the design phase services. And so what I'm looking for tonight is a total authorization of $10,241 for Vertex to go ahead and procure WSP for your MEP commissioning services.
Questions on that?
I was just curious, there was a wide range. And it was, I thought, you know, in the spreadsheet breaks down by area, there's so many differences. I was trying to understand what was accounting for the range of quotes. And, you know, there's 20 days of functional testing for the high one, and there's 2 days or 2 testing visits. You know, what are we giving up with a lower quote? Is there anything, are you comfortable? Because some of it seemed very, very different from the low to the high, and I just don't understand enough about it.
No, great. It's a great question. So the spread would be tighter on a newer building because people really understand what they're getting into. You know, when you're getting into a renovated building, you don't know where the challenges may be. And so, you know, RFS being at the higher end of the spectrum was protecting themselves more from, we think this covers everything that's out there, right? And that they know there's troubleshooting going on. And that's why we did equalize WSP a little bit by adding a couple of site visits to bring them more in line with the higher end of the spectrum. I purposely picked these 3 firms because they tend to be the more cost efficient from some of the other ones that are in the MSBA pipeline. There were many other firms we could have brought to the table that would have been much higher than the high bid here. And so when we targeted these 3, we went with 3 that we knew were tried and true, but also 3 that tend to be on the more sharpen your pencil side of the spectrum. And so you're really seeing that where WSP and NV5 are really very competitive, and RFS was trailing a little bit behind. Some of it comes from how bad they've been burned on various renovation projects, and some of that comes just from wanting to give a higher level of service. But I do feel very comfortable with WSP and that we will get out of them what we have from the other 2.
Okay, thank you.
Question on the budgeting piece of this. Is this already included in stuff we have in the budget or the contingencies, or is this adding to?
Yep, so excellent point that I skipped over. So overall, we have $100,000 in MEP commissioning services. So this $65,653 is about $34,000 below that overall number. And so that money is money that will be removed from the ask coming up at town meeting. And so we won't need that. Of that, we had $40,000 appropriated currently in the current phase. So the $10,000 is currently covered under the initial appropriation. So that money is covered, but we need to ask for less at town meeting because this overall competitive price proposal came in below the earmarked money that we had set aside for the upcoming town meeting.
Thank you.
So just so I'm clear on that, so we've already approved the amount, but we just need to approve for them to expend it in this manner?
Not exact, so there's many points there. So we, on behalf of you, split the budget into two phases. So there's the $3 million in design phase services that essentially carry us through the summer, which is through the end of bidding. And then there's the construction phase that then pick up in the summer and then carry on. There's a little bit of overlap there. So there was some money set aside for commissioning to bring them on at the design phase, so that covers the $10,241. There's additional money earmarked for the upcoming town meeting, and so that money will be reduced
In the total, okay.
in total.
Got it.
And the Vertex piece is management of this subcontractor?
That's correct.
The extra lift there? Okay.
Is there somebody who would like to make a motion?
Sure. Let me see. I will move to approve, is it WPS?
Yep,
No, WSP.
WSP.
I move to approve WSP as the project commissioning agent.
Do you need the
I
amount?
need the amount, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't say
So
that.
with the lower amount, all we need to appropriate tonight is the $10,241.
Okay, I move to approve WSP as the commissioning agent and the amount of $10,241. Period.
Okay. Motion by Amanda, is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Lori, all those in favor?
Aye.
And it is unanimous. Thank you very much, Jeff,
Thank you very much.
tonight and last night.
Appreciate your time.
Jeff, can I just have you go back to the cost slide real quick?
This one?
Yep. So just so the committee knows, the motions document for town meeting will begin to get printed next week, April 10th. So the number that we can put forward to the motions document is the 48,550. But as Jeff said, that number will continue to be refined and we can make a motion on the floor to the final number. But that's the number that will get printed in the motions document, just so the committee is aware.
Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Welcome.
All right, then. We
Thank
will.
you for your time.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, Jeff.
Resume our reports with the superintendent's report.
Okay, I don't know if we need
feel
Bob
like
to
it
work a
was
little
on
bit of
there.
magic. Here we go. There we go. All right, thank you. So this is the superintendent's report for April 4th, 2024. I thought I would be a little clever with my opening slide because it doesn't much feel like spring out there. I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about the Department of Public Health and COVID. So we have an update, and it's interesting that Mrs. Fogg was here tonight just talking about this very subject. What has happened is that the Massachusetts Department of Public Health has changed its COVID guidelines. And so what the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has said is that they're just going to follow the DPH. They have no intention of sending communications to school districts or families. And so with that knowledge, we went to our nursing staff and we had a meeting, and the nursing staff now will begin to implement the new guidelines, guidance and timelines on Monday, April 8th. So that's coming up immediately. And this would not be a very big deal, except that it does exactly what Ashley Fogg was talking about tonight. So when we have kids who get strep or they get the flu, those days are not technically excused in the Hopkins and public schools. But historically, COVID has been, and here's the reason why. So if currently I was spending a lot of time with Mr. Lebrad and he contracted COVID and he said, I just tested positive for COVID, I might think to myself, I don't really have any symptoms, I don't feel bad, but I should probably do the responsible thing and test as well. And if I did, and I tested positive, even if I was fever-free, symptom-free, I felt terrific, I would have to stay home for 5 days from school. And so that's why we were excusing those days, because the state was telling you you had to stay home. You didn't have the right to make a choice there. So now, if you look at the second bullet up there, and I'm sure you probably can't see that, but if you have tested positive for a respiratory virus and you are absolutely 100% asymptomatic, you don't have to stay home anymore as long as you don't have symptoms. And while they recommend that you increase your hand washing, you avoid crowded places, you wear a mask when you're indoors, you can still come to school every day. So COVID will no longer be an excused absence. It's just expected that if you have symptoms and you've tested positive and you have a fever and your symptoms aren't getting better and your fever isn't decreasing without a fever-reducing medication, then you stay home. So that it will be new for us on April 8th, and I think that that will probably be the trend that happens across the state.
I have a question.
Yep.
Can you flip back?
Yes, I'm so
Okay.
sorry that you can't read that. It's
No,
very,
then,
very small.
okay. If I have symptoms of a respiratory virus, I'm supposed to stay home until I no longer have a fever for at least 24 hours?
Yes.
Without using medication?
Yes,
Now, is that excused or unexcused?
that would be unexcused.
Even though you've told me I have to stay home?
Well, you would if you had strep, you would if you had the flu. So it's an interesting thing, and I mean, this might answer some of the questions. The state says that anything above 10% absenteeism is considered to be chronic absenteeism. And so if you have 180 days of school, you get sort of 18 absences according to the state. We think that 18 absences are a lot of absences, but of course that can happen to a kid. You could get strep, then you could get the flu, and all of those things. And so really our nurses are very good at working with families on a case-by-case basis, especially when you get to high school where there can be loss of credit for absenteeism. At the elementary level, what's interesting is state law says that our assistant principals have to send those letters home when a student reaches 7 absences in a 6-month period. So I will tell you that those assistant principals are spending hours and hours and hours of time sending those letters, but they need to do that. And I know that when families get them, they think, oh, because my child has missed 7 days, he had a bellyache one day, he had a high fever another day, he got strep, and now we're over the 7 days. I know that it feels really challenging for families, but that can't change unless state law changes. So, and I think that a lot of school districts had become remiss if they weren't sending those letters. And then there was a very big case where a child sort of just disappeared from the rolls of a public school in Massachusetts. And that's when the state buckled down again on sending these letters. And our legal counsel has said to us, if state law says you need to send those letters, send them. Because if you don't, something happens, you will be on the hook for it. So it's sort of a way of keeping track of kids, and it's not really to insult families, but it feels that way, I think, when the letters arrive. And I'm happy to bring this back to another meeting so we can have more conversation about it, since it wasn't really,
In the agenda.
COVID was on the agenda tonight, but nothing else, really.
Can I just, for a point of clarification, it says if you tested positive for a respiratory virus. I know this is specifically related to COVID,
That's
but
what
I
we're
would
talking
assume
about,
that would
yes.
include RSV, the
Yes.
flu,
Yeah.
even though I think we associate the flu with probably feeling ill
Yes.
in a way that you wouldn't necessarily know if you didn't have symptoms.
Right.
In the masking is a recommendation, but not a mandate.
That is correct, yes, yep. Yeah, people aren't taking flu tests at home, but people,
Right.
I mean, it just became a part of the pandemic that people just tested,
Right.
which makes COVID interesting. All right, so let's talk a little bit about policies. I thought I would revisit this policy, JICI weapons in school, and it's really just an explaining kind of revisiting. This does not have any deliberation tonight. It's not for voting, but we received so many letters from people that I wanted to make sure that, you know, some of our thinking was really transparent so that people at home could hear that thinking. So just in terms of legality,
Because in the Sikh faith, a kirpan is worn as what they would deem to be a benign religious, with benign religious intent. And it really does represent and further the Sikh ideals of generosity, compassion, and service to humanity. The United States legal system has consistently recognized the kirpan as an article of faith. And so if you go to federal buildings, you can enter carrying a kirpan. And I think that there's a lot of case law that sort of supports the carrying of the kirpan. In terms of religion, and this one was really interesting to me as I went through the process of better understanding, so I thought it might bear repeating here tonight. Americans are, by and large, people who adhere very well to anti-weapon policies. We talk about them all the time. And I think that when we talk about that, it's kind of at odds with the Sikh religion's mandated duty to carry the kirpan. For a baptized Sikh person, the kirpan represents a religious article, and somehow, if you are an American person who thinks about that anti-weapon policy, it's hard, I think, for us to be able to take a look at that kirpan and not conflate it with an anti-weapons policy. It's a challenge. And when we want to define that kirpan as a religious artifact, it's really listed as an exemption in our weapons policy because the kirpan isn't a weapon. And I know that it's strange that it lands under a weapons policy, but we did have to say that there are things that resemble weapons, and we have excluded them because they are not, and they are rather an article of faith. Why the policy? So before we ever had this policy, students were wearing kirpans to school. And they wear them in ways that they are sheathed, so they are, always contained in a metal or a wooden sheath. And we didn't see them, so we didn't know the kids had them. Typically, they are mass-produced in India, and so the ones that our kids typically have are 3 inches. And so they are so small that if they're wearing them under their clothing, and people will say, I have shorts and they have just a zipped place where you can put them in. I wear it around my neck and I wear it under my clothing, so we never see them. So the policy for us was actually a good thing because it really helps us to know which students are wearing them and who is in fact a baptized Sikh. I mean, you could be a child who observes the Sikh faith, but you're not baptized, and so you wouldn't carry a kirpan. And typically the kids who are baptized and who are carrying the kirpan, they are typically kids who have been through puberty, so they are older kids, but they're also kids who are making a commitment to their faith. Lots of different kinds of religions have that moment at which a young adult says, I'm going to commit myself to the faith. And when a Sikh student does that, one of the things that they will do is carry a kirpan. So it comes with, I've gone a long way to say that it comes with commitment, it comes with responsibility, and part of that responsibility for a student is entering into that agreement with us in the Hopkinton Public Schools. So we know who's carrying them, and we know that level of maturity of the student. And then just one final thing that I often think about with safety is that in our schools, we have scissors, we have box cutters. Mr. LeBrod and I have visited biology classes in the 6th grade where kids are using scalpels and cutting open earthworms. Kids have compasses. There are all kinds of things that are very sharp objects. And so the kirpan is, to my thinking, far less dangerous, really. It has a dulled blade, it has a curved blade, and it's always sheathed and it's worn under the clothing. So for me, in terms of safety, I know there have been a lot of people corresponding with us about concerns around safety, and I think that this policy and the way it's worn and its role as a religious artifact, I think really makes me feel a whole lot better about our children carrying kirpans. We also know that Sikhism is really the 5th most practiced religion in the world. And so while it might be a little uncommon to us here in Hopkinton, it's certainly not uncommon around the world for people to be carrying a kirpan. So I just thought I would bring those points up so it would give people something to think about. And still, if people have questions, they can reach out to the central office, and I'm happy to have conversations.
In regard to another policy, this is FF, and as you know, we have had a letter requesting that we name the stage at Hopkins High School after Valerie von Rosenvinge. We would typically bring forth any other suggestions, and we don't have any others, but I did receive one email from a parent, Missy Corbett, and I thought I should read it aloud so that you can hear the support for naming that facility. So Missy Corbett writes, retiring from a dedicated career marks a significant milestone in an individual's life. It represents years of hard work, commitment, and contributions to their school or organization. And when I think of the contributions Valerie von Rosenvinge has made to students, families, and staff at Hopkinton High School, I can think of no better way of acknowledging her time here than by naming the high school stage after her. Naming a facility in honor of a retiree is a meaningful way to pay tribute to their lasting impact and legacy. By naming the stage after Valerie, we not only celebrate her achievements, but also immortalize her dedication and influence for future Hillers to appreciate. It will serve as a constant reminder of her invaluable contributions and the mark she has left at Hopkinton High School. Over the past 22 years, Valerie and her longtime assistant, Clorinda Kershey, have supported, nourished, led, and loved many Hopkinton High School students who may not have had a place to call their own at school. Valerie took in everyone and made them feel special and, more importantly, seen. From the first round of auditions to the final closing circle, Valerie encourages and supports the cast and crew at every turn. The bonds they form give students a reason to come to school and be a part of something. Furthermore, naming the stage after Valerie symbolizes our gratitude and appreciation for 22 years of exemplary service. It is a way for us to express our respect and admiration for all that she has accomplished during her tenure and to ensure her legacy lives on for years to come. All right, so we can move on to student awards. As you can imagine, I am wonderfully proud of all of the students at the high school who have earned Scholastic Writing Awards, and these are just in alphabetical order. I will only read the name once, although you will see that there are some students who have won gold and silver keys and honorable mentions in multiple different categories. So we have Dan Applebaum, Esther Bay, May Chen, Siddhi Danda, Emily Evans, Jessica Fan, Lila Harper, Yishan Lee, Anna Naroyan, Keisha Rajgor, Tegan Ronan, Prisha Srivastava, Alexandra Shion, Owen Silva. Alexander Stefan, Sheethal Yadupa, Radisha Vyas, Amanda Shi, and Jay Zhu. So those are a lot of pieces of writing and a lot of things to celebrate. We have some quick curriculum and instruction ones. Mr. Lebrad, you can feel free to jump in on these. Do you want to do these ones? They're
Happy
really
to.
yours.
Sure. So tonight, we're always excited to be able to let you have a peek into all the classrooms and all the good work that's going on when you might not otherwise be able to. Up on the screen there, you can see these are some first graders, and what they are doing is they're using vertical non-permanent work surfaces in their math class. And this might seem like just another modality for writing, but there's a lot of power in this model. The teacher whose classroom we visited when the children were doing this was part of a study group around a text called Building Thinking Classrooms. The idea being that the more that students can be working on non-permanent surfaces, so a dry erase board where they can quickly erase something, the more likely they're going to take risks and be not afraid to make mistakes. The other idea is that the more vertical it is, the more visible it is. So knocking down the walls of I'm working in secrecy, but rather others can see my work and they can learn from it. And I can look around and see other models and be able to grow from what my peers are doing. So you can see the students are working either independently or in partnerships there, expressing different ways to add. In this shot here, we've mentioned number corner once, twice, maybe 40 times at this committee. But I thought that this picture was a great one to see. You can see that if you look closely, the students are in pairs and they're engaged in math discourse. They're discussing their rationale for why the teacher has posed a question, and right there what you're seeing is students in partnerships discussing why they're going to defend the claim that they're going to. So rather than just completing something on a worksheet, they are needing to defend what they're thinking. If you go down one grade, so the last two were in first grade, now we're going into kindergarten. We've talked about the Children Discovering Justice pilot that we're working on this year, where we're fulfilling that mandate from the state to have a civics program K to 12. This is our launch in doing this at the K-3 level. Part of the program is a civic action project. Now, you might know that at both grade 8 and 10, there's a state law that says students are engaging in civic action projects. It's not required in kindergarten, but in Hopkinton, you can see that there are 2 kindergartens that have come together. The teachers co-taught this particular lesson where they were talking about civic action. They used a model from a neighboring community, and the students actually voted on the civic action project that they wanted to undertake. So they will be compelling us in the near future to make a change that will provide better equity for all in Hopkinton. So more on that.
Will they be coming here? It'd be very fun.
I'll pass that word along.
Like to be compelled in person?
There you go.
You know, what's cheerier than seeing kindergartners? We could take them at the beginning of the agenda so they can get to bed on time.
Our teachers have also been engaged in some great professional learning, both for themselves and to advance the work of the district in the past few weeks. Right here, you see a cohort that I had the privilege and pleasure of joining for a day in Marlborough. This was a grant-funded post-secondary program development planning session. So essentially what we were doing here was thinking about, we were gathered with about 12 other school districts, and what we were doing here was we were working as a cohort of Hopkinton educators to think about what is it that we want to make sure that our kids have when they leave high school, and what groundwork do we want to start laying beginning in 6th grade so that students can best identify their passions, what they're drawn to do, so that they have the skills for career, college, or whatever their post-secondary adventure is going to be. This is really the jumpstart to some work that's going on, and that will be taking place between now and the end of the year. The planning stages of what could be, so that next year we can start making some definitive plans and really anchor some of the great work we've been doing over the last many years, so that things don't become special events, but rather become part of the infrastructure of how we support our kids 6 to 12. And then another topic we've talked about here, computer science and digital literacy. This was a group that traveled to Sharon for a 2-day workshop. Again, I had the privilege of spending a couple days with these great folks from both our middle school and high school. And we were working with DESE to actually develop the framework for what an even stronger, even more robust computer science offering in Hopkinton could be. This was really great. A lot of visioning, a lot of thinking about what could be, and identifying along with other school districts what barriers exist that would keep us from being able to expand an already really strong program beyond. And then finally, if you walk the halls of Elmwood School this spring, you saw a lot of positive self-talk. And so if you were able to zoom in really carefully here, you'd see that in a couple of classrooms, if you looked outside, you would see the students created positive self-talk flowers. And on each of the petals, they identified one or more different credos, mantras, or other statements that would cheer themselves on. A couple of them that you might want to see. One is, "I'm the boss of me." Another one says, "Making mistakes is how you learn." And then, of course, the best one of all, which is, "I can do this."
And that's that. I also have a slide here for later, but when you get to the Elmwood naming, Laura, you were good enough to send in all kinds of things related to Charles, if you go in that direction. So I did put it on the slide for ease of everyone here tonight. But I wanted to share one other aspect of that, and that is that the elementary, well, it's not really, it's the current Elmwood school teachers and some 4th grade teachers from Hopkins have been working with the design team with Perkins Eastman. And they get together on Friday afternoons, and they've been talking about what the interior of that building and the direction that they're heading in is really nice, because it's kind of fitting hand in glove with your thinking. What they are thinking about is in each of the 3 wings, if one was sort of themed around forest and another around meadow and a third around river, and they're really just drawing on Hopkinton's sort of amazing landscape. So that's where they are right now, and it's kind of interesting because it feels like you have kind of come together in your thinking. So I will leave that, and
Sorry, Dr. Haverhill, was it always Forest, Meadow, and River, or was it Marsh at one point?
we did have,
Is it going to be River because it's Charles?
is it Marsh?
It was marsh.
And it went to Meadow.
And it went to river or lake. So they, marsh didn't have as much blue as they wanted,
Okay.
so
okay.
it transitioned. So you are correct, it was marsh.
So a lot of us abut wetlands, there's a lot of marsh, and so it resonated. I just was curious. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Because earlier today, too, we talked about it being lake at one point.
Yeah, so he keeps going back and forth between
River
lake
and
and
lake.
river. So depending
like,
on
no.
where we all land, maybe they'll decide. But it pulls in a stronger color
I see.
than what marsh was doing. You know, that was the feedback with the teachers.
I feel like marsh also has like a negative
It's,
connotation.
yeah.
So pretty, 'cause I
Swamp
love
marsh.
Meadow's so
marsh. It's
pretty.
like teeming with life. Like the wetland behind my house is
And
teeming with
mosquitoes.
life. And the peaches. Anyway, we digress. But it's good to
All right. So the other thing that I know the committee was interested in seeing, you know that we have, well, this is our district climate team serving, but I'll go to this slide. You know that we developed a Hopkinton Public Schools definition of school climate. And as one of my goals this year, we put together a district climate team. So the district climate team has been meeting once a month on Friday mornings. We've done a whole lot of different things. We have things that we've identified as sort of low-hanging fruit in our buildings to sort of, jumpstart morale. And it's really interesting to see how it's different, what happens at Marathon versus the middle school versus the high school, for example. But they're all like appropriate, I think, for kind of generating some vibrancy in those faculties. And I think it's making a difference. So we did start with a definition, and this goes all the way back, I think, to January of 2021. And our definition is that school climate reflects how members of the school community experience the school, including interpersonal relationships, teacher and other staff practices, and organizational arrangements. School climate includes factors that serve as conditions for learning and that support physical and emotional safety, connections, and engagement. And then on the other side, I simply list the people who are part of that team. Our 5 building principals are all there. Abby Hanscom, Director of Student Services, Carla Burley, Director of Social Emotional Learning. We have 2 paraprofessionals, Becky Black and Lauren Thomas. A high school teacher, Sarah Elam, middle school teacher, Catherine Brummett, Hopkins teacher, Kelly Phillips, Elmwood teacher, Molly Labb, Marathon teacher, Elena Shagnon, and then Jeff and I. In December, I think maybe it was December, we decided that we might want to put out a survey because it felt like we had made some gains, and if we had some data about really where people were and how they were thinking, that would be able to give us some things that would be maybe more actionable. So we did put out a survey. One went to staff, there were 30 questions, a parent survey that had 19 questions, and a high school, middle school survey that had 28 questions. We also made special surveys for our grades 3, 4, and 5 students that were really developmentally and age appropriate. So I don't want to leave them out. I'm going to read to you the introduction to the staff survey, and this is just a sample, but it kind of gives you the context in which the survey was sent. The district climate team has been exploring ways to analyze the climate in our school district. While this particular survey is going out to faculty and staff, there are other developmentally appropriate surveys that will go to all students in grades 3 through 12, as well as a survey designed to elicit the perceptions of parents. Hopefully, this will give the climate team a feel for the ways in which all stakeholders experience the Hopkinton Public Schools. Jack, did you take that survey?
I don't think we have yet. I think we'll take it next week or something. Yeah.
I think next week is HSA.
Yes.
That's okay. I will hold you accountable for that answer because we give you guys more surveys, but you don't know which one you're taking on a given day. So of those 77 questions that I just described, about 70 of them returned positive responses at least 70% or higher, which means that 70% on each question would have said that they agreed or strongly disagreed. So that felt very good to us. So on the next few slides, what you are going to see are areas that the district climate team are going to take into consideration for future climate building. And I do want to go back to those 70 again, because I don't want you to think that it was sort of capped at 70%. There were some slides or some pie charts or questions where the answers, the responses came back at like 90%, 95%, 98%. So I want to make sure that I say that, because I think that those answers are really a reflection of the interpersonal relationships that exist between our teachers, the collegiality, the relationships between teachers and administrators. And I want to just make that very clear that it feels from those answers that we have a lot to celebrate. So I'll start with rules, behaviors, and consequences, because this is an area that kind of jumped out for me as something that we would want to consider. So when it says 1,745, that was the number of grades 6 to 12 students who responded. And they had to either strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree with the statement, the school rules are fair and consistent. And the kids at a rate of 87.6% either agreed or strongly agreed that the school rules are fair and consistent.
Can I just comment? That seems like a very solid number of students that participated in the 6 to 12.
Yes, because they can do it during Hiller block at the middle school or flex block at the high school. So if all the kids are there and we say, just open your Chromebook and take this, they do. So it's wonderful to have that, yeah. The consequences for breaking rules are fair and consistent, and the kids at 82.1% agreed and strongly agreed with that statement. This is the parent response, and we only had 272 parents respond. When expectations for behavior are not met, student consequences are consistent and equitable. And parents said that that was true, or they agreed or strongly agreed, at a rate of 72.8%. And now we're at faculty and staff, and you can see where this number goes down, which is why I've included it, because I think it's probably an actionable item for us. When expectations for behavior are not met, student consequences are consistent and equitable with outcomes matching the student's needs. And faculty and staff agreed or strongly agreed only at 60.6%. So I did want to talk a little bit about that, because I think that there are some things that are happening kind of in our world that may make that lower, or it may not. And it may not just make the teacher one, but student ones and parent ones. You know that the law has changed around suspension with 37H1/2. So it used to be that if a student had a particular infraction, we would say, okay, we're going to suspend you for a day, or we're going to suspend you for 2 days. And I think people saw suspension as something that was really big. And you can no longer do that. You can do it if you feel like that student is at great risk to harm themselves or harm someone else in the school community. But other than that, you have to go to restorative practices. And so that's really where we've been, and that doesn't mean that there aren't other disciplinary measures. I mean, certainly there are, but restorative practices are sort of the first line of thinking. I know that our building principals will feel a little frustrated by the fact that you can't tell people what the consequences are. So we talk about disciplinary measures or restorative practices, but if, for example, something happens to Mrs. Kavanaugh's kid at school, we can say, we've worked with the other child, but we can't tell you what those consequences are. Or if something happens in a classroom, we can say to the teacher, we've worked with that student, but we can't tell you what the consequences are. And I know it leaves people feeling unfulfilled at times. So that's just some of the thinking around that. But I would also be disingenuous if we didn't say that we are seeing some sort of changing of behaviors, things that are just a little more disrespectful. And the teachers, and I include it because I know that it's top of mind for our teachers, especially teachers who have been in the district a long time. They feel like they had been here at a different time, and maybe it's post-COVID, but, you'll see that we ask about kids and the expected behaviors. So, I don't want people to think that the behavior in the Hopkinton Public Schools is deplorable. It's just those little things. Sometimes when I'm talking to teachers, we almost refer to it as like a million bee stings. So it's just one teeny weeny little disrespectful behavior. But when you have that experience 15 times in a day, or 11 times, or 3 times, or 10 times in a month, you start to feel it. And I think that's where we are right now. So to take a look at this one, this 361 responses are faculty and staff, and we also had them agree with or disagree with the statement that for the most part, students in Hopkinton exceed behavioral expectations. And so exceed is a very high bar, and at almost 70%, 67.9%, our teachers, faculty and staff either strongly agreed or agreed with that statement. So there's a level of comfort there, that when we
What's the
say
percentage for
exceed
disagree?
behavioral.
What's the percentage for disagree up there?
So if we are at 68% agree or strongly agree, if we are at 30% say disagree, then we would only be at 2% strongly disagree.
So the interesting thing, which we don't have, but it might be going forward, would be comparable data to look into to see how did our faculty and staff feel 5 years ago?
Right.
And to be able to look back at that, because while I love to see the agree and strongly disagree, I am concerned about those who disagree and how that feels to teach in an environment where they feel like the students are not exceeding behavioral expectations. I know we've talked about anecdotally some of the challenges of students post-COVID and behaviorally, and just I worry about the impact that has on the learning environment, but also on our faculty and staff and other students' learning.
How do you also, like, are you capable of breaking it down by building?
We could actually break this one down by grade level. Yes, we could, yeah.
Because I wonder
Oh, no,
if you're getting more staff responses in certain buildings than others.
Right. I'm sorry, we could break this one down by building, but when we ask the kids, we could break it down by grade level. Yeah.
I'm interested in the exceed.
Yes.
It's an
Yep.
interesting question because our behavioral expectations are pretty solid. I think they're pretty, and I think from the very first question, students feel that it's clear what's expected of them. So the expectation that we would be asking them to exceed, I don't know, it's an interesting question. You know, it's just interesting that we use that word exceed instead of exceed or meet, or, because we've set the standard because that's what we think makes the school community work. And so if you meet it, isn't that
That would be what you'd want.
right? You want to meet it. You wouldn't. You certainly would not want to meet that. You know, you wouldn't want to fall short. But exceeding is just an interesting word. I'm not sure that how to read the answers because of that word in the question.
Fair point.
Yes, it raises a very high bar, right? And I think, so the district climate team did go through every one of these questions, sort of question by question, and we had long conversations about them. I think one of the things that has always stuck out for me in Hopkinton is that we believe that our kids are super great kids. Like, I think we've always held near and dear to our hearts that our kids exceed behavioral expectations. And I think that's how we got to that statement. As you said, I would love to see what that would have looked like in, say, 2018.
As just perspective, you know, when you were talking a couple slides back about the discipline and about suspensions, the number of suspensions we had per year was not so high
Oh, no.
that I would expect that, I mean, it was a small number as an
Yes.
overall percentage, that not having suspension as a tool that administrators are using, I wouldn't expect that to have a large impact on student behavior. I also, you know, I would hope that there are tools available that wouldn't require a child being removed from the learning environment. But I'm not sure what, you know, where, are there other things that that teachers and administrators need backing from even just from us here, to help them feel like those disrespectful behaviors are not the thousand little bee stings, but fewer and further between. I do anecdotally know from my own child that the behavior, some of the behaviors in that middle school age group, which is impacted differently by COVID, I'm sure, than Jack's grade or than kids who are, down at Marathon. But it's surprising, having had other kids go through the middle school, at what we see and hear about now compared to, and I'm pointing at you just because I know you've also had another child go through and have one there now.
Yeah, I would agree that the anecdotal discussions on behavior and just incidents that are reported home are very different than what was even a few years ago, so,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, and I don't think that's isolated to our middle school. I mean,
I don't think it's isolated to Hopkinton, but I just think it's,
Yeah.
like you said, if we had that evidence from before, it would be interesting, but I don't necessarily know that it would drive you in any particular direction as to what to change. I think it's something that, it's something that we just have to be creative with how we implement that within our own even curriculum, because I think the social emotional component that we're continuing to focus on in different ways is just gonna be more and more important.
Jack, do you see any differences?
Not really from my day-to-day activities in the high school, but I can see the problem where the teachers, if it keeps on occurring, then at the same time as it being 100 little bee stings, it's hard to punish every single one without having a sort of all teachers have not reputations, but kids talk outside of class. So if a teacher's repeatedly punishing people, they might gain that reputation of being sort of hard-nosed and wants you to sort of, they'll do more to make you focus in class, then that could make kids not want to show up as much. So I don't know, the problems could bleed into each other.
And I don't know that, we talked about the bee stings, but I think that if we even went to Marathon School, one of the things we put into the budget was a 0.5 school adjustment counselor for Marathon School. And I think that some of the behaviors that we see there aren't the same kinds of behaviors that we would have seen 5 years ago. And that could be a result of the pandemic, but, the state will talk now about legislation to eliminate any ability to suspend a child K-3, whether that child is a risk to himself or others or not. And that would really handcuff, I think, a K-3 principal. We are not, as you said, not a district that moves to suspension, easily, but every once in a while, even a first grader, we say that the child probably needs some time till we can figure out what it is what kind of program we have to put in place to ensure that child's safety. And without the ability to do that, it can be challenging.
So I guess this is maybe my own misinterpretation of the law, but when I think of kids who are a danger to themselves or other people, in removing them from a situation where they could potentially become more dangerous to themselves or other, it would seem like there might be therapeutic interventions or other ways that the schools could support them that would not necessarily have them in school in their regular classroom if they're not able to.
Right.
For a time until they're able to be safe.
Yes. All right, so the next theme we'll look at is trust and respect. Put some glasses on for this. So this is the teacher responses, and they are responding to the statement, students treat teachers and staff with respect, and faculty and staff did agree and strongly agree on that one at close to 77%. So I've included this one because I don't want you to think that things are sort of rampant in terms of that. But I also think that 76.8 would probably have been higher 5 years ago, as we've said.
That's an interesting difference from the slide, the meet and exceed behavior expectations.
Yes, yeah. The next one is the teachers and staff feeling trusted and valued by central office administrators. And that one was a low one. It came in at 66.2% of the faculty and staff either agreed or strongly agreed on that one. And some of the things that were cited are things like curricular changes that were made and they were not sure that they had been part of that decision-making process. They said that they would prefer to see administrators, central office administrators, more frequently in their buildings. And then I think that there were also some residual responses from our difficult budget season last year. But I think that those are things that are actionable. You know, when we call together curriculum groups, sometimes it's 15 people in a room, and maybe we could do a better job of continuing to convey to all of the people at a particular grade level or in a department what's happening inside that room in terms of curricular change. And I know that Mr. Lebrad and I try to be in the schools as frequently as we can be. You know, but at least one day a week I am in each one of the buildings. So, and very often it's more than once that I land in a place, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm in students' classrooms. So that's definitely a goal for me. And I've shared that with the district climate team that if there is something that you want to do, you'll make time to do it. And then teachers and staff feel trusted and valued by the school committee. Again, I think that that has some residual from a difficult budget season, and so that was a 72.1% of the faculty and staff agreed or strongly agreed. I included one of the quotes from the survey because I thought it was really telling. It wasn't one that, you know, talked about curricular changes or people in classrooms, but I think this one was kind of a nice embodiment of the way teachers might be feeling right now. And it says, it seems as though central office administration prioritizes the perception of what they want the Hopkinton Public Schools to be and not a true image of how hard the teachers are working, the challenges we're overcoming on a daily basis, the real needs to be addressed, for example, increasing student population, growing diversity in both culture, social emotional learning, and learning needs, managing and addressing growing chatter among parents on social media that can spread incorrect or misleading information. So I thought that that had a bunch of those things that were like weighing on teachers every single day. And it is true that we are a district in Growing Plains, and I think that that kind of support for faculty and staff would be helpful. All right, overall climate. This is the part where we can feel a whole lot better, I hope. So one of the questions that we asked toward the end is, how are you feeling about the overall climate? And so when we asked the faculty and staff, the overall climate in the school I work in is positive. So to either strongly agree or agree with that statement, faculty and staff did so at 90.8%. And then we asked the same thing of the students. Overall, the culture in my school feels positive, and we'll remember that this is just middle and high. And 92.9% of the kids either agreed or strongly agreed. When we asked parents if they felt welcomed at their child's school, parents and guardians at a rate of almost 95% either agreed or strongly agreed. And then I included this because I want parents to know that we're listening. So someone had written into some of my feelings. I'm unsure if anyone will actually read any of these comments or internalize the survey results in a constructive manner. I believe a lot of these surveys are initiated for public optics and ultimately work to marginalize the silent majority. And so we, or at least I know I have, read through those comments many, many times. We have a whole bunch, 127 slides that we promised ourselves on the district climate team we would go back and review before our next meeting. And so I do want people to know that we are in fact listening. And I also want to make sure that people know that we're listening to our grade 3, 4, and 5 students. And I pulled some quotes out from theirs because I thought that they had some really good insights for little kids. I think students should have a say in what we do in class because we do so much stuff. I think that we could have something where the student could give a suggestion and we could somehow try to work it in. I think that a kid could be the one to present what we're doing, but didn't have to. I think the kids would be a little more focused if the kids were doing the talking. And I have a complaint about how the school deals with the problem. I like the idea of behavior reflections and all, but I think if a student keeps on getting behavior reflections, eventually they won't care about getting in trouble. I think if you get 3 behavior reflections, there should be a bigger consequence. And maybe there is, and this writer doesn't know, but it's a good piece of advice. And you should have paper trays or reuse plastic trays. There's one for our food services department, Mrs. Roberts. So I do want the community to know we're listening, that these items are actionable, and our district climate team is really working on all the things that people are telling us. You can't do all of it at once, so we are prioritizing things in our next upcoming meetings. So thank you, that was really long.
So the one question I have too, and this actually comes from a comment from my middle schooler, but that prompted me to have a further conversation with the middle schooler, because I was thinking about surveys of the support staff, like custodial staff and the kitchen staff. I mean, to me, they are kind of the unsung heroes of of those buildings, and they actually, I think, tend to see the students potentially at their worst and at their best. Like when you're in a teacher's room every single day, you can't hide for 180 days from that person, but like you don't have the same interactions, and I think, to me, it's always indicative, and I will say this even in business, that when I'm out to dinner, how somebody treats wait staff, or how someone treats a driver or somebody opening the door, is very indicative of how that person is generally versus what you see as best behavior for somebody that they think is going to impact their future. So I often wonder about surveys of that part of the staff too.
So you bring up something that for me was, it was something that was a little bit heartbreaking for me, because we didn't just give this to the teachers, the paraprofessionals. We sent this to every single adult in our whole school district. So that would involve our custodians, our front office administrators, the cafeteria workers, everybody got it. And we asked them to check a box, you know, what role do you play in the Hopkins Public Schools? And of course, you could check other if you didn't want to say. But we really didn't have anyone who checked the box of custodian or cafeteria worker, which indicates to us that, what it may indicate to us is that they don't know that we would think their voice was important. So it's really important work, I think.
Is that something that perhaps would be worthwhile, as I assume, like kitchen staff have some kind of group meetings at certain points, that somebody could sit down on a discussion with them and get a read on what they're thinking and feeling?
I think we could certainly do that.
Because I think that would really make them feel
You're
seen.
very close to the cafeteria.
You know, that somebody takes the time to come and sit and say, what's it like working in here? How are the students treating you? Because I sense what you say is that that might be a population that the students are less respectful of.
Yeah.
Because they have no bearing on their, you know, teacher has great, you know, power.
Be curious, not to stick you on the spot sometimes. But do you see any trends with other staff, other than the teachers and the people that would be responsible for things like grades and other pieces of your lives, the cafeteria workers, the custodians, other people?
Yeah, generally with the cafeteria staff, I think there's a sort of a positive relationship. I don't know if it's because students are always happier at lunch than they are in the classroom. But generally, when they're checking out, I've never heard anyone not say thank you to the cafeteria staff that's like working the computer as you're checking out. I don't get lunch from the cafeteria, so I never really interact with them. But I think many of the times where students are being like disrespectful, like whether it's like leaving trash in the cafeteria, there's no like, they don't have a relationship with like the custodians, so they don't really know who they're like affecting when they do that. And so like it's harder because like if you do it in the classroom, like obviously you're gonna have to see the teacher again and you have a relationship with this teacher, but I don't think any of the students know the custodians or have relationships with the custodians, so they don't feel that same like regret if they were to make their lives a little bit harder, which I think is a big problem.
And that's exactly the conversation that I had with my 8th grader, because there was an incident that he was reporting that he wasn't a part of, and we had gone to the concert that night, and he went back to check if the event had been cleaned up. And he kind of was making light of it. And what I said to him was, I know you weren't a part of it, and I know that you're making light of this, but that made somebody's day harder.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what bothers me, is that it made somebody's day harder. They otherwise wouldn't have had to do that, to fix that, to clean that, to do any of that. And so for me, that's a vital conversation. And exactly what you said, if someone leaves trash out, somebody else is taking care of it, but they don't understand the impact to somebody else's day. So that's where I was thinking about it from the survey perspective.
Any other comments before we move on?
Will you be sharing with the school committee any of the rest of the survey, or do you have that if anyone has any questions?
Do we have what question?
The rest of the survey, the 100 and whatever
Oh, yes.
charts to go with all the questions, yeah.
Yes, and I mean, if I shared with you all of those other pie charts, I think you would see a lot of really nice responses there. So I don't want to have appeared too focused on some of the negatives, but I think if we're thinking about improving climate, we have to think about how we're going to grow our climate. So we didn't talk about successes, but maybe we should have, but yes. At some point, we could absolutely share with you the 127 slides. You could see every pie chart, and they feel kind of good, so.
Thank you. So that brings us into the school committee chair report. I'm going to start with the payroll warrant S24019 has been approved, also included in your folder. And then it was a busy week with emails that came into the school committee. We had several on the weapons and school policy, some who were both very much in favor of the piece regarding the Kirpan, and then also some who were concerned about it. Also just want to highlight that I know that it hit the larger news, a little bit of a delay from when we had the meeting, but one piece that in looking what outside news sources that struck me is there are pieces that don't get into what the actual policy is, and things like people feeling like this is something that is brand new, that students are carrying Kirpans, whereas we know, because we've discussed the policy at length, that students not only in Massachusetts but across the Commonwealth and nationally have been carrying Kirpans for a long time, that there is case law that makes it actually a legal obligation to allow that, and that Hopkinson's policy is actually more restrictive because before we didn't have any knowledge of who did or did not carry Kirpan, and we didn't have any procedure that went along with it for following up with students. So I would encourage people who are interested in watching the replay of our previous two meetings, and also to look at some of listen to some of the comments that were made in our last meeting in particular. So we also did receive an email regarding the attendance policy. I'm suspecting from the fact that we also had a public comment on that there were some recent increase in letters that went out regarding that. And then we did have some emails on the Hopkins forum, and one person who had said they had trouble with the QR code as well. So that is it for chair report. Anyone with liaison reports?
policy committee met, but you always see that back on an agenda item, so we'll just let that go. We continue to chug along.
Okay,
Yep.
great, thank you. Brings us into the school physician contract.
Okay. So annually, we have to re-enter into a contract with our school physician, who's Dr. Stephanie Boder, right here in town. And so we are adding 3% to the stipend that she had earned last year to be our physician. So this year, the stipend is not to exceed $7,975.36. And those would go to Dr. Boder in quarterly payments, and I just need for you to approve that contract.
So I just also want to highlight that this was something that was discussed in executive session ahead of time. People will note from the top of our agenda, the topics that we had for the hour of executive session ahead of the meeting. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion or any?
I move to approve the school physician contract for 2024 to 2025.
Motion by Susan, is there a second on that? Second by Lori, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So with many thanks to Dr. Boder for continuing on as our school physician. That brings us into the Student Opportunity Act. Mr. LeBron.
All right, good evening again, everyone. Tonight, I am seeking approval of the Hopkinton School Committee for the district's 2024 Student Opportunity Act, or affectionately known as SOA plan. A little background for your awareness, and I'll try to summarize what you received in your packet memo. School districts under the law in Massachusetts are required to submit an SOA plan every 3 years to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So we, along with every other school district in the Commonwealth, is doing that right now, and they are being submitted this April for review by DESE. Part of the law is that every local school committee has to vote to approve the submission to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. On background, the Student Opportunity Act was passed in 2019, again requiring a 3-year plan to be submitted every 3 years with reviews in years 2 and 3. The focus of the plan is leveraging data provided by DESE, surfaced from our MCAS results, where they identify the subgroup with the greatest relative disparity between one particular subgroup and the population overall. In Hopkinton, that subgroup that has the greatest disparity between the whole population are students who are identified as having disabilities, and within that, what we have identified more specifically is that disparity living in literacy, particularly grades K to 8. Obviously, MCAS assessment data points only give us grades 3 to 8, but we're extending that to be more comprehensive K to 8, knowing that 3rd grade doesn't just test what happened since September of that year. So what districts need to do is they need to select from a list of evidence-based approaches and strategies provided by DESE. Luckily for Hopkinton, those evidence-based practices are already things we're either doing or looking to implement in the year ahead. So really quick, DESE asks us to pick one or more evidence-based practices. In Hopkinton, we opted for the or more part of that opportunity. So really quickly, we are looking to focus our resources in the years ahead on enhancing PD and training. 2 models that we're going to try out with that in the year ahead are going to be designated monthly release time for teachers during the school day so that we can provide targeted, high-quality professional development around curricular programs or best practices, focusing on literacy, and even more specifically focusing on the instruction of decoding and the use of one-on-one or small group instruction time at our earliest grade levels, and leveraging decodable texts that the teachers already have in their classrooms and are already using. We're also going to increase the capacity of our staff, both the number of educators as well as the amount of training provided to educators in using specific multisensory reading instructional programs, programs such as Orton Gillingham that you likely have heard of before. We're going to continue to expand our co-teaching model. We have been working on that for a little while here in Hopkinton. Last year, we did some great professional learning with our middle school and high school staff. This year, next year, we're going to expand that even more so that we can make sure that at the secondary level, teachers have that training, And at the elementary level, we're implementing a new scheduling structure. So we will be even more thoughtfully than we have before, which is already pretty thoughtful, cohorting students so that we can most effectively deliver co-teaching to those students. And then finally, we're going to focus on our tiered system of supports. This is, if you've heard of Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 1 being the instructional program that every student gets, with the thought that every student needs to get what they need when they need it. So we're going to help our teachers have that toolbox ready to go. We're going to provide the structures for them to be able to implement those different moves. We're going to take a look at what we have already for accommodations in our district and how we can make those even more accessible for our teachers as they continue to meet the needs of all the students before them.
Right? Questions on this? Okay. If there are no questions or comments, is there somebody who would like to make a motion relative to this?
Sorry, I do have one question.
Okay.
You,
Carrie, turn the page.
you mentioned professional development. Would that be during already scheduled early releases, or are you thinking of using some of the money to cover subs to add additional time?
The latter. So we'll already continue to leverage the PD time that we do have. We have a couple early release Fridays that we're able to use with our teachers. We have some Monday afternoon meetings, but we're looking to do some what we might call in-service release time periodically. Which, you know, the headline that people might hear is, wait, you're taking my teacher away from my child. But we know that there's a pretty hardy body of research that says that doing that and allowing teachers to engage in really high quality professional learning pays great dividends. So we're going to work on that this year. We're excited for that. It also gives proximity to being a teacher being able to say, I can go right back into my classroom and I can try that thing out.
Yeah. And the only other question I had, I know this is focused on literacy. I can't forget some of the math numbers that we saw for our struggling students. So it looked like your third strategy, when I read it before, might potentially encompass, could maybe be stretched to fold in some math. I didn't know if math was part of this, because that was something that struck me from when we were talking about the math before, that we do have a performance gap
Sure.
there.
You know, and when we talk about our multi-tiered system of support, that I think that's a great spot where you're going to see that across the spectrum, but most specifically in our early years, where teachers are thinking about how do I get what that student needs right then and there. So you'll see that in literacy, but you'll certainly see that in math, and we have that happening in so many spots across our district already. I think one of the things we really want to do is make sure that we shine a light on it, so that type of model and structure can grow even broader.
And I think, too, when DESE asks you to put together a Student Opportunity Act plan, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't be working on things like social studies or science or math, but they want that sort of laser focused on,
One thing.
take that group of learners and what are you going to do to raise that achievement?
Thank you.
The memo was initially 17 pages long. We pared it down.
I had my red pen.
Ran out of ink.
I ran out of ink.
Well, I move to approve the Student Opportunity Act as presented.
Thank you. Motion by Susan. Is there a second on that? Second by Lori. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And so that passes unanimously. Thank you. You're up again with the SEL mental health grant.
All right. Good to see you all again. So I am requesting tonight the acceptance by the Hopkinton School Committee of a competitive grant from the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education awarded to the Hopkinton Public Schools in the amount of $14,374. The grant is called Supporting Students' Social Emotional Learning Behavior and Mental Health and Wellness Through Multi-Tiered System of Supports Grant. As you might recall, I presented a grant similar. The title was just as long, and so we're back again. I'm calling this a companion grant because we were awarded the initial grant of $63,000, and this was kind of like an attachment to that. DESE said, you have this money, you're using it well. As often happens, the state finds that they have some unused money, and they reallocate it. And so they reallocated that $14,374 to us. And we would be eager to accept it, and may or may not already have wonderful plans for that money should you approve our use of it.
Any questions on that?
My only question is our all dependent on the fact that we had an administrator that was focused on SEL? Like, is that gonna change our eligibility at all?
Well, it won't change our eligibility. I would be, disingenuous if I didn't say that Carla Burley did a wonderful job in authoring with me our grant proposals, for sure. But I look forward to continuing, with our administrative team to pursue these grants whenever they are possible and working hard to implement them. As you've heard Dr. Kavanaugh say in presentations throughout this budget season, we are moving from, and I'm going to mix up your terms, and I'm going to do it gloriously, but from a building model to a sustaining model.
That's good.
Close enough,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see, move to accept the SEL and Mental Health Competitive Grant Award from DESE in the amount of $14,374.
Motion by Amanda, is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Susan, all those in favor?
Aye.
And that is unanimous and passes. Thank you very much, as always, for your work on securing grants for us.
Thank you.
All right, so this moves us into old business item A, which is the new school project name selection. I know this has generated a lot of community interest, and am thankful for all those who have shared their ideas with us. Do you want to pull up the slide? that
I
had-
sure do.
Is that your handiwork? I like that.
I can't, so I will say that I did some brainstorming after our last meeting, and I wanted to share it in a way that wasn't gonna cause us to deliberate clearly. But we also got a couple additional, latecomer, but related to the same theme we were looking at. And I'm trying to remember what they were, but they were pretty much in the same vein. It seemed like we actually had a lot of support for moving in the nature direction we are moving, so.
It looks like
I think we had one, Echo Lake
Yes.
was
that
one, and I think
thank you.
Quinnipiac was the other one, which was the Massachusetts name for it,
Yeah.
the Quinnipiac River. Yeah.
The other one that was, I think Dr. Kavanaugh sent us was the Honey Hill one, that I had no idea that was the name of the school. That was the Historical Society building, so that was interesting.
Yes, I'm not
I
sure.
feel like I've gotten a
It
history
looks like
lesson
it's going
as
to
part
go
of
on,
this.
and then it doesn't.
Quinnipiac? Is that how?
He's back.
I think it's, yeah.
That was my only concern about that one, was could anybody pronounce it?
That, yeah, for young kids, it might be.
Young kids.
We like to exceed expectations, so.
I know, but that might be. Where's the wood teeth?
I'm slightly concerned about that for the stage at the high school too, because I have not had the pleasure of meeting with that teacher to know how to pronounce her name correctly. And I feel like I will need a phonetical.
Yeah. One day I did ask, and she told me there should be that like little hanging schwa at the end of her name. I was like, There we go.
All right.
And what I did say to Dr. Kavanaugh when I sent this was there is no pride of authorship. It was just brainstorming from our previous discussion about the river and all of that, so.
Right, which,
Her family was on a long car ride.
Is it possible for you to type in the other two that came in?
Yes.
On the river theme?
Yeah.
The Echo, it was Echo Lake,
Echo Lake was one,
I
yeah.
think, school, because that is the source.
and then are there others that people brainstormed that we want to throw up here as well?
Okay. Echo Lake?
Yeah, and I think Quinnipiac.
QUIN?
Yep, I think so.
And then we,
Good.
And I thought of Charles Meadow, but I don't think
All right,
it's
so-
any
but-
better than
but
any of
all right,
these.
Throw it out, throw Charles
No,
Meadow out there.
but I mean, it goes with your meadow theme.
I like the marsh.
I
was
know,
the
you
drab
did like
marsh.
Shrek.
The Marshwood School.
We can talk about it if you want that all one word. There we go.
Okay. So, do people have comments, kind of in ways you're leaning with
We
all
can't,
this?
I guess we threw out Charles River, right?
It's not on here.
We didn't throw it out, but the one concern that was expressed when we were looking at them last week is that there
Other-
already is a school named the Charles River School, and concerns about confusing that.
And I think Head of the Charles was popular,
Yep.
but there's a highly regarded international regatta called the Head of the Charles, which didn't seem appropriate to take that, since we're not.
It takes too long to say.
I know,
And
I
it's
feel
long.
like it was gonna be like cut down to the Hawk School. Like I feel
Oh,
like
that
for
would
the
be-
HOC, I guess
Yeah.
maybe, but it just, yeah.
I like the idea of keeping Charles in the name just because it was popular within the community.
I mean, I gotta be honest, I still really like Charlesview, but that's also because I know that there's concern because the neighborhood's there, but I actually like the fact that the neighborhood is there because it's in the same area where I think the entrance is gonna be, if I'm not mistaken.
On the other side of the street.
Right,
Yeah,
but like close.
close, yeah.
by,
That
yeah.
is. I don't have a strong connection. I was actually trying to figure out how to talk about the beginning of a river, and it was not coming to mind in any way, shape, or form.
But I would assume there would be something within the school explaining the significance of the name and the. Sure. Yeah. We had talked about that as it relates to people, but the same, I
Begin
think,
with
would be
spring? I
true.
would think it has to
Yes.
start with the
Like
spring.
Perkins Eastman Design could
That
have
was
that
one
in
of the
there.
synonyms. But Charles Spring has a lot of S's together.
Yeah.
I am kind of liking that Quinnipiac. It would be unique.
It would be
Would,
unique.
it would. I kind of like Charles Wood, because it combined, but
Well, maybe take out all the ones that start with river, and then that will help bring it down. That start with river. If we're all
Well,
in
again-
the Charles area, then we can help narrow
that
it that
help
way.
narrow it down. I mean, the other piece, and I think I said this the last time we met, was walking around kind of thinking in my head of, well, does it sound easier to, or flow more naturally to say,
Flow,
I'm headed to,
river.
I'm headed over to Rivercrest, or I'm headed over to Brookside, or I'm headed to Charles Spring, or Charles Brook, or Charles Wood, or,
I must have been bored during a meeting, honestly. I don't know where it all came from. So I used to love to write. And when I was in my younger years, I was an English major. So I think that's what, like, it got me into a good place with that. But I was trying to think of, like, the beginning of something, and that was where I was coming from. But I really liked the pathway around with the
Genesis.
Charles, so. Oh, yeah. Although that has such a religious connotation that.
Oh. I was thinking about, what's his name? Genesis band.
Phil Collins.
Collins.
There you go. There's your name.
All right.
What are other ones?
I
We
will
want to narrow some down. Go ahead.
I will say, if it were easier to pronounce, I did like Quinnipiac, just because I could imagine folding in sort of elements of Native history into the design, or,
They would learn to say it.
someone had
Quinnipiac.
suggested that it would be nicknamed the Q, but I think it is very different from the ones the community put forward, although two members of the community put forward, I think, Quinnipiac. But it's very different. it's very a different name. I personally probably wouldn't go with Echo Lake because we're not at Echo Lake. So for me personally, I wouldn't take that one. I don't really, I was thinking we should be distinct from the neighborhood, although I do love I like the sound of Charlesview, and it's so familiar that it feels right, and I live sort of in that, I live in Charlesview, I live on that side of town, so I pass it all the time. But I think probably for the school, I'd rather go with something unique. So it's not, no one part of the town feels more connected than the other, or.
Could simply just call it.
Charles Elementary.
Someone did ask me if we could still have it be Elmwood. And I don't know how I feel about that. I did, personally, I thought, well, we're creating a new school with 3 grades. It's like, it is a new beginning. So it seemed appropriate to pick a new name.
Yeah, I was asked the same thing, but I was reminding them as to why Elmwood was named Elmwood. It was on the corner of Elm and Wood.
Well, Charles Row would sort of be along
Yeah.
the same theme.
I like Charleswood. I like,
Yeah, I like Charleswood too. It's descriptive.
yeah, the Charles and a wooded area, I guess. It also seems to hearken a little bit to Elmwood, so has a little bit of it in there. I don't even know if that's spelled correctly, though. Like, would you have them together like that?
Would it be 2 separate words?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feels like it could work. Either way. Do people want to maybe say your top 2 in there and narrow it down that way, or take the other end of that, pull out names first that people feel like would not be top choices?
Well, we could pull out all the rivers
Okay.
right off the bat.
Yeah.
Would you like me to move anything
If you-
starting
that
with
would be
that
good.
with river?
Through it?
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah,
strike
straight, yep.
through it?
And I would strike through Echo Lake too.
And Echo Lake, yeah.
We used to, when we were naming our kids, refer to some names as speed bump names, even though we liked them, they were speed bump names, like they slowed it down.
Oh,
Echo Lake kind of feels like that to me, but
No.
this does feel like naming a kid.
Oh, River Crest.
Got to be careful what the
How-
initials spell.
If we're taking out the rivers, how do we feel about the brooks?
I would take out the brooks as well.
Yeah, by all means, I think that's
They're
the way
nice
to go.
sounding words, but it doesn't seem right for the,
There's no brook there.
right, that is a point.
We could brook the subject, though.
It was simply just like, what was the start of the river? Like,
Yeah,
This is
Yeah,
great.
this is great.
Yeah.
Have I missed any?
We're getting rid of Echo Lake.
Echo Lake, yeah.
Actually, now that I just.
Elmwood.
know,
Now you
badmouth-
like it.
Now that I just badmouthed Brook, I kind of like Charles Brook. How do we feel about Charles Brook? Charles Row, I actually don't know who Hayden Row is named after.
Well, I thought it was just the row house, like,
I
But
don't-
it's ROWE.
They're
that's-
super fancy
but I
British
was
That's
people.
thinking it
Did
was
you happen to look
old.
that up?
English
Old English.
I
Either
thought
the
it was,
first name, Rowe
okay.
was the last name?
I thought it was a name,
I think so too.
but I don't, so I.
I'll be over here.
Is
on
that
the-
Mr.
Googler
Trivia?
on it.
I think you're right though, because it's Hayden Row Road. It's not
Yes,
Hayden
that's right.
Row.
And I always feel like if we're gonna take someone's name, we really
Yeah.
should know something about that
Yep,
person.
okay, so I would, I'm okay with taking that one out,
Okay.
unless anybody feels differently.
Nope. I'm gonna be, like I said, no pride of authorship here. This is
Charles
brainstorming.
Bend. Charles Bend is interesting. Just fun fact, Quinnipiac means winding or meandering. It was named because the river meanders. It's like it only obviously goes a short bit by the way the crow flies from Hopkins to Boston, but it's something like 180 miles in length because it winds all the way.
Oh,
Just a fun
Charles
fact.
Bend, I like Charles Bend.
All right, if you want us to go from our top two for.
Yes,
for-
let's go
from
top two.
these.
I'm gonna need the enlarged text again, though.
Yeah, I know, I'm like struggling right now. I'm gonna say my number one is Charles Wood. And then my number two. I think my number two is Charles Path, and it's strictly because I was thinking about the path between the two schools. So I'm gonna put those as my top two.
Jack, we'd always love your thoughts too. So
yes,
you
please
get an
jump in.
official vote, but you
Yeah.
feel free to give an opinion. No pressure.
So I'll jump in if somebody else doesn't have a
Go for
top
it.
two. So my top one would be Charles Wood as well. And I think my second one would be Charles Bend. Sold on the
The
bending.
one,
Yep.
yeah.
We don't have a choice of just plain Charles.
You can. You could put that out
Would you like
there
that
as
to
your
be
top one.
first choice? You could put
It's
that.
Charles Elementary.
You can select that as one of your choices.
I'm gonna select Charles as my.
Is that your
and
number one?
And I really like Quinnipiac.
Okay.
That's your number two?
That's my number two. It was my number two when I saw it in the letter. I liked it. I liked it then.
And I think my number one, I think Charles Wood is my number one. Quinnipiac is a
keep
close
thinking
second. They're really tied.
Collingswood.
Oops, yeah, number one.
The reporter, Collingswood.
So I would suggest that we remove any name that didn't get more than two votes, that didn't get two or more votes. I mean, two or more top choices. Does
All right,
that work?
Jack. What are your top two?
My top two. I like Charles View is probably my first one. I don't know if I get a true vote or not. And then I'd say Charles Wood is number two.
You could take out the ones at least that don't have any votes at all
Okay.
and include Jack's.
We seem to be coalescing around Charles
It
Wood.
does,
I mean,
yep, so
could
we
do
also,
that,
if
or we
somebody
could
wanted to
do-
make a motion regarding that to forego the next round, that's fine with me too, unless people wanted to consider the smaller list.
Charles Wood Elementary. Can I just ask, are we comfortable with the Charles Wood as one word?
Yes, we should define how we would like that.
I think that should be two words.
I think that's what the group think was on that. I have no preference.
I'm good
Could our
with either way.
stenographer please have both one each way? Would our stenographer please put each one as one word and as two words? Would you mind, please?
Oh, you'd like to see it
Yes.
both ways?
Yes.
Like Charles Wood like that, and then Charles Wood like that?
I think I like it one word, actually, now that I look at it like that,
I
but
think I like it one word. Charles Wood. You know,
I would think Wood should plural myself, but
you
Charles
think it should be
Woods.
what?
Woods. Who's Wood Caesar? I think I know.
I know.
You may be right in terms of the language piece of it.
Well, yeah, because
Prefer wood as opposed to
we don't
woods.
go to the wood, we go to the woods.
Maybe we say them all out loud, everything they're gonna vote. So we have Charles Elementary. Maybe Dr. Kavanaugh.
Charles Bend, Charles Path.
Can we put elementary? 'Cause we got-
Oh,
okay,
yes,
no,
sure.
okay.
Charles Elementary, Charles Bend Elementary, Charles Path Elementary, Charles View Elementary, Charles Wood Elementary, Quinnipiac Elementary.
I'm still with Charles Wood.
As one word or two.
One word. I also just think it would look better on the stationery.
I would make a motion that we name the new Elmwood Charles Wood Elementary School as one word.
Okay, so there is a motion by Amanda. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Lori. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we have a new unanimous name on that, which is the Charles Wood Elementary School.
All one word, right?
All one word.
I feel incredibly honored to have been part of naming two of the elementary schools in the district, so I very much appreciate that.
That's good. That is good to have that out.
And I think it goes with the themes that they have up there. It's gonna be
Yeah, very
fantastic.
beautifully, yeah.
Yeah. Jack, thanks for
Yes,
weighing in.
No problem.
we put you on the spot a bunch tonight. We should maybe submit our stuff to you ahead of time so you can think about it.
And maybe one of the things that can happen is as you're designing the inside of the school, things like Headwaters and Quinnipiac and like the
Yes,
story could
that
be
would be
told in there
nice.
with the rest of
Oh,
these.
that would be
Oh, I
lovely.
like that.
Oh, I like that.
We'll tell that to our friends at Perkins.
I like that.
They're
I like
very
that a
good.
lot. I think community would like that too.
All right, that brings us into policy KHCB, which is dissemination of literature, second reading. Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay, yes. You know that we had talked about this one last time. It's super easy. The changes are minimal. In the first paragraph, what we talk about is dissemination of digital materials. And at the end, what we have talked about is flyers could be posted on the district website with the approval of the superintendent. On rare occasions, the superintendent would allow paper flyers. We're really just trying to, for the most part, go green here. And there are just some flyers that we just don't put on the district website. Some of them go out by individual schools, but the district website presents less of those.
Did we receive any feedback on that? I've
We
not
did
heard
not.
any chatter about that in any venue.
Well, I would move to approve the revised policy KHCB, dissemination of literature.
Okay, so there's a motion by Susan. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Lori. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that is also unanimous and passes. Okay, so. Sorry.
All right.
That brings us into the Hopkinton Bullying and Prevention Intervention Plan. Dr. Kavanaugh, we did review this at our last meeting as well.
We did, and I think that people did not have a problem with the revisions. There were just some questions, I think, about the storage of discipline records. And so I did reach out to the high school. What I have learned is that if you are a teacher at the middle school or high school, or really any one of our schools, and you are looking in Power School, you do not have access to student discipline records. Even if a teacher has entered in an infraction into Power School, that teacher does not get to see the consequences that are imparted to the student. Teachers don't get to see what their fellow colleagues have entered into Power School. So that's comforting, I think. And then the administration can obviously see anyone's discipline record all the way from K to 12, which is one of the things that I think helps us to understand where a kid has been and where they're going. If you are a teacher who is on the National Honor Society determining panel and you see that a student has some discipline infractions, they would only be high school ones. And if in the event that you have applied in 1 year and then you are turned away, but you sort of re-up the next year, you say, I'd like to take a second chance at this, what the high school will show you is only the last year's discipline record, so that we give an opportunity to a kid to sort of really clean things up and see if they can do that for a year. And then I think our final question was, does a kid see his own disciplinary history? And the answer is no, they do not.
Okay, are there any questions?
Thank you for looking that up.
Sure.
I move to approve the revised Hopkinton Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan.
Motion by Lori. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Susan. All those in favor?
Aye.
And it is unanimous. And thank you to, I know it's a lot of work for the committee that worked on that. So.
Yes, I would like to publicly thank. And we had students who stayed with us too, so it was really a nice group.
Right, that brings us into item D, which is the disbanding of the Bullying Prevention Committee.
All right, so the charge for that subcommittee of the school committee was to sit down, take a look at the bullying prevention and intervention plan. And we do this every 2 years, and I think we fulfilled that. So I think that as a committee, you can vote to disband that subcommittee.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion?
I move to disband the Bullying Prevention and Intervention Committee.
Motion by Susan, is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Lori, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and it is unanimous and is officially disbanded.
Thank you.
Are there future agenda items that people want to make sure that we add to our list ongoing?
So in light of the public comment and the fact that we got another comment about the excused versus excused absences, I feel like it would just be worthwhile to have a discussion and understanding. The part that I'm not understanding and what I'd love to hear more about from the administration is, are the excused and unexcused absences determined by each district, or is there guidance that we get from on high about what counts as unexcused and excused, and is it within our purview to even change that? So I'd love to have a little more information on that, not to discuss tonight, obviously, but just, I feel like there's some education missing for me personally on that, but also may be helpful for the community at large. I do recall that every time these letters go out, even when I was on the committee before, that it does create some angst. And I think in some ways, like, having some more explanation, just like you said, the purpose behind the letters, what they're meant to do is raise awareness for families, but also just understanding where we have room to even make changes to the policy.
I agree with all that. I would also add in, as something I'd like to see as part of the discussion, is what comes after the letter and what kind of how schools are able to work, the administration to work with families.
And what the state regs are and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Okay, great. So that brings us then into items by consensus.
Okay. As superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
I move to approve the items by consensus.
Okay, motion by Susan. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Lori. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that moves us into adjournment. Is there somebody that would like to make a motion?
I move to adjourn this meeting.
Okay, motion by Susan. Is there a second? Second by Lori. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and we are adjourned at 9:42. Thank you all for tuning in. I just want to say our next regular meeting is April 25th. We have the Hopkins Lower Middle School Community Forum on April 30th. Also, not part of just the school committee, but the 29th is the EHOPS Know Your Vote, which will feature information on the schools. May 2nd is our regular meeting and special workshop. May 6th and 7th, potentially 8th, but definitely 6th and 7th will be this annual town meeting. And then a regular meeting on May 16th. Thank you all and have a good night.